Okay, so hi everybody. Thanks for coming to this special edition of our weekly webinars. We've got a Q&A today. We have 7 speakers, some of them who have given a presentation for us before, and we've got some new faces as well. So get all your questions ready and we can ask these Q&As as we go along. So I'll kick off because I've got a lot of questions that came in before today. This question, I'm going to ask a couple of people this. It's for Lanny and Oli. So Lanny, you run a dive centre in Mexico, and Oli, you run a dive shop in a centre in Manchester, UK. So this question is, how have you been dealing with the effects of COVID on your business? Has it affected the plans that you've had? Has it affected events that you've had scheduled?
Okay, yeah, obviously it has been fairly devastating, really. I taught my last cave course at the beginning of March, and then we've had pretty much zero business since then. So it's been quite tough. I mean, the nice thing about here is that we have had opportunities to get out and dive once a week or so, just to sort of keep our hand in. But we've lost numerous group bookings. We've cancelled our big cave camp event, which a couple of people on the screen there were planning to come out for. So yeah, it's been huge. We have, I mean, on the bright side, the workshops never looked so tidy. We're ahead of all the game with servicing and stuff. But yeah, it has been quite tough. And hopefully, we're looking at some maybe coming back and getting some people from the States in July. It's going to be our first sort of diving. So it's pretty much put everything on hold for 6 months or so. Yeah,
that's fair. Well, I guess it has to happen. I was going to ask you about Cave Camp as well. Has that been rescheduled? Have you got any plans to do it, push it to next year?
Yeah, we were overbooked pretty much for the event in September this year. And I think given the situation we're in, the lack of certainty with international travel and the need to quarantine when people go back to their own country, the sensible thing to do, although it was quite disappointing, as we've basically decided to just shift it to the dates we had in 2021. So it's going to be happening now in September 21 for the next event.
That makes sense. So you mentioned that your shop's never looked as tidy, your centre's never looked as tidy, has it? So what about you, Oli?
No,
what about yours? I know you've been doing stuff behind the scenes too. Sorry, Lanny, I cut you off there. What were you saying?
No, I mean, we are still hopefully going to have people who booked for Cave Camp coming out. If we're still able to dive, then if people have got flights on the same sort of scale. And in the whole year leading up to Cave Camp in 2021, we're still open here at Underworld for training, and we're right on the doorstep of the best cave in the world. I think the only people on the panel who haven't been out here diving are I think Oli and Oli and one other there. So yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah. So Oli, what about your place? How's it looking?
It's an absolute mess at the moment. Because I'm still doing a lot. In terms of your original question, we had a Scapa trip in that period, a Malta trip and an Egypt trip that were all on hold, moved on. Other than that, we had some massive plans this year in terms of doing a lot more in Malta and Egypt in terms of our regular training, and all that is on hold as well. So I've been here most days, to be honest, dealing with online orders and working on the shop. We painted the front of the shop. We're in the process of putting new lights up inside the shop, and we've worked a lot on the online infrastructure as well, the website, marketing, the SEO, etc., etc. So we certainly haven't sat still, but yeah, to call it fun, definitely not, and it's also definitely not been profitable. So it's been a hard period, but we've decided to make the most.
That's it, isn't it? You just got to make the most of it and just get ready and gear up for when we can go back in the water.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I got some preliminary positive news for EasyJet going back to Malta beginning of July. So let's hope that's true, and let's hope that's going to happen, and we'll be there as soon as we can.
Good stuff. This is sort of leading into what we were chatting about before we started. Paul, we were chatting about when you're next going to get back in the water. Do you want to have a little chat about that?
Well, I was due to get back in the water this week or next week, but obviously with my little slip in the kitchen and a few broken ribs, that's not going to happen. But certainly we had meetings with the BDSG, which is the British Diving Safety Group, who've been kind of working with all the agencies via the RSTC and various other organizations. Everyone's been extremely diligent. And it was declared that we can go back in for limited shore diving as of Thursday last week, if I remember correctly. So my plan was to get in as soon as possible. My expeditions have all been cancelled, so quite good news there from Oli about EasyJet going back to Malta, because I do a lot of expeditions in Malta. But at the very least, as soon as I feel the rib and the stomach have healed, I'm going to go on a limited shore dive. That's for sure. I think I'm going to take my JJ and my side mount rebreather and a bunch of Trimix and go and do a 10-meter dive.
Sounds pretty good.
Because that's all I've got. It's going to be hilarious. I can't wait to get back. Yeah, all the gear and no idea. I've definitely no idea now. I've been in the water for over 5 months.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Another question that's go on.
No, go for it, mate. Go for it.
No, I'm just reading off this list. So we had a few questions came in before, and there's a couple that I'll ask to Kev and James. So it's about retraining and crossing over. So James, I know you were an instructor and you sort of retrained with GUE to become an instructor with them, right? And Kev, after you went pro, you sort of started teaching with Raid. So do you two want to expand on the reasons behind that?
Kev, do you want to go first, mate?
Yeah. Well, I think my diving journey 12 years ago in Mexico, of all places, Lanny, with a Paddy Dive Centre, and it was more of a something to do while I was there. Diving never really, it was not for me, I wasn't really that bothered. But the wife, Meg, she dives, so it was a bit of a family trip. Came back to the UK, totally forgot all about it, never dived again until I went to Cyprus. And no, it was Ibiza. Went to Ibiza for 2 weeks, and I picked the only 2 weeks where it rained torrential for a whole fortnight. And every day there was a Canadian guy on the beach, and he kept saying, come diving. And I'm like, no, mate, I'm not interested. I'm here on holiday. And he basically said to me, well, you're wet anyway, you may as well come under the water. So yeah, I did my Paddy Advanced while I was over there, and came back to the UK and thought, yeah, I need to do something with it now. So I joined my local BZAC club, and I got through to instructor within a couple of years with BZAC, and then I was looking for more, really, more than what I could get from the branch. So that's when I started putting the feelers out. I'd done a bit of work with Ian, I'd done a bit of work with Gary, a bit of work with James, and just tried to, well round myself, really, and have a look at the options of what was out there.
Yeah, I think Kev's hit some of the advantages on the head. I think you can probably par the question into two halves, and that is from a diver's perspective, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being multi-agency, and from an instructor's point of view, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being multi-agency. Kev's hit the nail on the head in terms of the spread and access of skills that you're able to have. I think from an instructor's point of view, I think it's valuable, or there is value in that there is a wide range of tools which are available to you, which would fit different students with different environments better. I think we need to be mindful that where there are disadvantages, I think they're acute. For me, that comes with harmonization of standards, and particularly where standards from two agencies are at conflict with each other. And you need to, as an instructor, be mindful of how you address that. You may even get a situation where there are 3 standards at play, the one that you dive, and then maybe 2 opposing agency standards. And we have to be very, very careful with this, because what we don't want to do is give a student either incomplete or contradictory information. It may be a procedural standard, so a gas share or something to do with a decompression bottle. It may be a parameter such as gas planning or PPO2 limits. We just need to be mindful of them. And my personal view is I don't think we can say, well, if I'm wearing this hat, this safety parameter is okay. But if I'm wearing this hat, then this safety parameter is okay. I think we need to be very, very careful of that. We need to be careful because if we are, then the advantages of having access to that broad knowledge base and toolkit are profound and useful to a diver. But it is an area where we need to be careful and tread carefully.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's some good answers there. Yeah, got a few questions coming in that are sort of related to that. Anthony, do you want to ask one of your questions, and then we'll go back to my list? Anthony Searle, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, hi guys. Talking to you from near Shrewsbury in Shropshire. Thanks for sorting this out. I think it's great how a diving club like Kev's and getting like-minded people together with a little bit of enthusiasm and respect for everyone. You can get so many great people together, at a time when we can't see each other face to face. So I really appreciate, the whole panel, spending their time and putting this together for us. So I'm a novice diver, and I guess COVID's changed a lot of things. I just started my diving journey last year in Malta. Met Kev around about Christmas time, and then I was looking forward to this year, going on trips, going to Egypt, diving with the seals up in the Farne Islands. Bang, stops. So I'm 10 dives into my diving career. How do you see COVID and post-COVID changing diving going forward, positively or negatively? And what can your average diver do to adapt?
Is that to anyone in particular, Anthony?
Yeah, whoever feels like they want to chip in.
I'll have a go. Thanks. That's actually an incredibly poignant question because, as you can see, if you look carefully at the screens, you're going to see all of the learned people sitting in front of you with their hands over their mouths going, yeah, this is exactly what we're trying to fathom out. Okay. So once a week, James Sanderson, the guys from Sunto, Mark Evans, various others, we all meet together to discuss where we are in the UK and somewhat internationally with how COVID-19 is going to affect us. There's been this mad rush to get information out to everybody, which has thankfully not been too contradictory. Because you have one agency or one manufacturer recommending a certain protocol and somebody else going against it. There's been a lot of unity in the dive industry. I've got to say it's been utterly fantastic. The Divers Alert Network have worked tirelessly to provide us with new protocols. I think the things that you're going to see post this, I think you're going to see the industry rise to the challenge. I think you're going to see dive centers as well, part of that industry, really rising to it. What I think you are going to see is you're going to see a lot more safety protocols in terms of cleaning dive equipment, protocols for doing skills, teaching skills, ratios for working in the water, fun dives, ratios on boats being affected quite dramatically. So your 22-man liverboard may be reduced quite dramatically as we move forward, depending on what the outcome of this virus is. If we see any dramatic spikes, of course, we're all in for a bit of a slap around the head again, as our governments will regress our lockdown back to what it was. What we're all trying to do as an industry, and this is dive masters, instructors, manufacturers, training agencies, is we're just trying to come up with a sensible set of protocols that you can follow to remain safe, that work in combination with the instructor, the dive center, the equipment that you're working with. But I do think we're going to see quite some dramatic changes. There've been all sorts of crazy recommendations. I say crazy, So do we reduce ratios down to 1-to-1 for teaching, or do we reduce them to 2-to-1? Do we mandate a 2-meter hose across the board in diver training? Because that means that 2 divers sharing gas for real are not on top of each other. There are other protocols where don't do your pre-dive safety checks. That's one thing that we saw that got some pretty rough reactions, was don't do your pre-dive buddy checks, because you'll dirty the regulators when you're doing it. We've seen much happen. I think over the next few weeks you'll start to see some real semblance of sense coming out of the industry, because the leading organizations, whether they're on the rebreather or the recreational side, or whether they're the divers alert networks or groups of well-learned medical physicians, they're coming up now with solid guidelines for us to continue forward. But do expect a difference. You know, it's not going to be like it was when you first learned to dive. It'll be a lot less open. But I think we're all encouraged by what's happening globally, especially as we're seeing the back end of COVID. And much like Lanny was saying, he's already starting to see bookings come back for July. That's very, that's really, really good and positive news to the industry, because Lanny is a tourist destination, very much so. So the fact that he's getting that tourism back, that's a real good sign to all of us. So yeah, I don't know if that would be my rough comments. My rough comments.
Very rough. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, there's a question that's sort of related to that. This one's for you, Ian. The question that came in was about when you see cave and mine diving in the UK coming back in. Now, I noticed on Facebook you've mentioned that you're talking to some of the mine operators. Any info on that?
Yeah, I mean, kind of really going on from what Paul has said, that there will be a fair few changes. And I think one of the things we've also got to consider when it comes from, especially in the UK with the cave and mine, is just not only the diving industry, it's the organisations like the Cave Rescue and everything which gets put in place, which would potentially be called if there was a cave or mine incident. I think one of the problems with the cave and mines is the fact that they're all on, well, most of them are on private land. People from around the country turning up and potentially bringing this shocking virus to their region until it's completely safe. I put my little rant up on Facebook the other day because people are still not bothering about this, and they're still turning up, and they have to, cross residential areas to get to these locations, and it's really kind of slightly unacceptable. So when we get slightly clearer about how we can actually move forward, then I'm going to be speaking with the landowners that I tend to deal with, North Wales, Peak District, that kind of thing, and really kind of getting their permission, their blessing, and how they want things done. Yeah. And so it won't be acceptable that we just turn up and rock up in their car parks, unload our gear. It will be really down to them. And I don't know, we may be allowed to go back diving, Cave Rescue may be able to come back, but if the landowner turns around and says, you know what, not this year, we can't do anything. So we really have to respect them. It only take them 10 minutes to put another lock on the gate, and then we can't use it ever. So, we really kind of, it's the landowners. They've got the entire power at the moment.
Yeah, I didn't think of that actually, with it all being private. Yeah, I'll keep an eye on that as well. Thanks, because this is something that I want to get into next year, or whenever we can get back diving. I'd love to try cave and mine, so I'll keep an eye on that. Thanks. Yeah, we've got a couple of things. Sorry.
The biggest gripe was not the actual landowner not wanting us to dive in the mine, but not wanting a whole heap of people from outside the area cross residential land. And that was the big thing. Nothing against us diving in the mine, but it's just how we affect the local community.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Got a couple of questions for Mark. I've got a question, and then Kevin, I think you've got one for Mark. For those of you who don't know, Mark Evans, he's not given us a talk before. He's a new face today. So hi, Mark. Thanks for coming. Mark's the editor of Scuba Diver magazine, which I'm sure you've all read. My question for you, Mark, was, were you a journalist before you started getting into dive journalism, or you were a diver and you wanted to get into the journalism side? Which way around was that?
I was a diver first. I started diving when I was 12. Well, actually, I had my first dive when I was 10, but I properly started diving from when I was 12. And I became a newspaper journalist when I was 18. So I then was basically the ran side by side. So I was diving for a hobby, and I was working as a newspaper journalist at local papers around Yorkshire. And then when I was 25, that was when the two joined. So it wasn't a concerted thought on my part to look for work in the diving industry. There was an advert for an editor for a magazine, and it turned out to be Sport Diver. So I ended up getting the job there as editor when I was 25. So I was one of the youngest dive magazine editors in the world when I got that position. And then I ended up being there for nearly 17 years before that got closed down, and I started Scuba Diver up. So it was my hobby and my job just kind of were running parallel, and then joined when I was 25, and then it's been one and the same ever since.
That's incredible. You got those things and they just both joined together. Perfect. Yeah, I think that's what we all want.
Yeah, it
nice.
was. It was the way it worked out. It was perfect, because a lot of people, like you say, you'd like to have a job that's your hobby, and that's what worked out for me. So,
excellent. Kev, what was your question for Mark?
Yeah, it was just to really to thank you, really, Mark, for what you've done. I know the magazine's on hold at the moment, but you're doing a lot online, which we do keep sharing and posting. Can't wait till the day we get our hands back on the magazine again. Have you any idea when, or is it just down to when we get back into the water and getting the content?
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny. Actually, myself and my business partner Ross were talking about that today. I mean, obviously, our main distribution point is through dive centres like yourself.
Yeah.
That was the whole reason we did the magazine the way we did, was to drive people every month into the dive centres to pick the magazine up. So it gives you guys a chance to talk to them, have a coffee, maybe they'll buy some kit, maybe they'll book on a trip, book a course, but it gives you that monthly contact with people coming in. Well, obviously, with the dive centres all being shut down because of COVID-19, we didn't have a way of getting it into the hands of divers. And then we also didn't have any way of getting it printed, because the printers that we use, they also shut down because of COVID. So it was a double whammy, really. One, we couldn't get it printed. Two, we couldn't get it into the hands of divers. So we had to make the decision just to put it on hold. But like you say, to keep engaged with the audience, we're keeping the websites updated. We've started our twice weekly live streams and everything now, which have been going really popular and everything. But now that there's the latest change where supposedly non-essential stores can open from the 15th of June, which hopefully includes dive centres, because at the end of the day, they are effectively a shop. So we're hoping that the dive centres all start opening up from that date. And in that case, we can then start working to try and get the magazine back in. So we've actually got an issue that we just got printed just as the lockdown on distribution and things with COVID came into being. So we've got a magazine ready to go. So we're aiming to get that into dive centres in June, and then get a fresh magazine with us up and running again with it into the centres in July, and then hopefully just keep going from there. I think you'll see a big focus on UK diving in the UK magazine, because I think there'll be a lot of staycations to start with, because we don't know what's going to happen with travel. So I think you're going to be getting people, at least we get them diving in the UK, and then hopefully we can start getting abroad as and when the flights come back on. So that's the plan at the moment. So hopefully, dive centres will be open mid-June. You'll see the magazine back in there from mid-June, and we can start trying to, all get back to some semblance of normality, in the coming months. But in the meantime as well, just quickly, in the meantime, we've also got a new one coming out that we've joined forces with Mr. Toomer here and Raid. And so we're helping them produce a quarterly digital magazine called The Edge. which is basically, although it's Raid putting it out, the content is designed for anyone to enjoy. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner, veteran, tech diver, free diver, whatever. There's stuff in there that you'll like regardless of agency. So keep an eye out for that. That will be getting released in the next few weeks. Okay, just one more quick one, Mark. You touched on travel then, being one of the key words. Next year, Aqaba, is that going to go ahead? You know, the festival that you talked about? Or was that,
at the moment, the festival's kind of all went by the by and everything. COVID didn't help with all of those plans. But we're looking at potentially doing some other bits and pieces next year, as maybe like a scuba diver focus trip. So it's kind of watch this space for that one. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Mark.
Right, I've got a quick one for you as well, Mark. You're Mr. Popular right now. Well, you're basically a keen and long-time observer of the dive industry with a particular eye, and I just wondered what your views are on how the industry is going to change, how the industry is going to adapt post this virus. We talk about going back to normal, but I don't think there is going to be the same normal, is there?
No, definitely not.
We're going to see a different world. We're going to see the industry change in the UK. We're going to see businesses adapt to what's to come. Just really keen to hear what you think is going to happen in the next few years.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I mean, like you said, when we say go back to normality, it's some semblance of normality. I mean, social distancing, I think, is just going to become part of the norm for an extended period. If they find a vaccine, great, but I still think that could be potentially 12, 16 months down the line, if they even manage to find one. So I think social distancing is something we're going to have to adapt to. I think that the knock-on effect of that is going to affect group sizes. As like Paul touched on, liverboards of 22, 24 people could be like long gone. When we go into inland dive sites, that's going to change. I mean, we know how busy some of these places can get on a weekend. So it's like, are they going to have to, when they can open, are they going to have to limit numbers to try and allow enough space for people to, to be separated? Even coastal sites, some of the busier coastal sites, again, is it going to get to the point where we have to limit numbers to allow for the social distancing? I mean, it's not all doom and gloom, though. I think out of all the sports that are out there, I see diving as one of the best ones that can adapt to post-COVID-19, because at the end of the day, once we're fully kitted up, we've got our regulators in and our masks on, and we're in all our exposure protection, that's almost like a hazmat suit, give or take. You know what I mean? It's like we are more protected than anyone going mountain biking, kite surfing, kayaking, any other sport. Once we're in the water, we've got the added protection of having water between us and whoever we're diving with. So you can't get safer than that. And I think that, you can get kitted up, most of the time you can get kitted up on your own. A lot of dry suits these days are cross-torso, so you don't actually need any help to get into a dry suit anymore. But I mean, again, it's all about sense. If you need to get zipped into your dry suit, you can both put face masks on, one of you's facing away from the other. The one who's going to zip the other person in, you could just literally hold your breath while you step forward, zip, step back. I mean, the risks of that are minimal. So I think, there's ways and means that diving can adapt to that. But as I touched on, I think you'll see more UK diving to start with. At least if we can get people back in the water and in love with diving again. The problem is I don't want people to have been sat out for that long, while people have been able to get out on the bike. Bike sales have gone through the roof. I don't want people to think, I'll get rid of that dive kit and I'm going to buy a bike because at least I can use that at the moment. So I think as long as we can get people diving, get them in, that would be fantastic. And then obviously, as we can travel in whatever way, shape or form that is. I mean, I do think myself, I think you'll see short haul flights being obviously the popular ones to start with, rather than the big long haul flights where you're on a plane for umpteen hours. So, the likes of Malta, Portugal, long weekend destinations, I think will be the first ones that go back to. But also, again, divers, as we know, are a resilient bunch. Well, either resilient or stubborn.
depending on how you look at it. You know, you look at the troubles that there used to be when there was all the troubles kicking off in Egypt. You had other nationalities were bailing out left, right, and centre very quickly. The Brits were the last ones that left because they were like, I'm a diver, I'm not missing my diving holiday, so I want to be there. So I think your bucket and spade brigade, general holiday makers might be a little bit more prone to be on the cautious side maybe before they jump on a plane again. But I do think divers will be amongst the first champing at the bit to go travelling again, just because they tend to be more adventurous spirits anyway. And that's borne out by some of the conversations I've had with some of the dive specialist tour operators who said that their clients, regular clients, have been onto them already, kind of saying, look, as soon as we can travel, you know, we want to go again. So, you know, I think, you know, we can try and be positive with it. Yes, there's some negatives. We know that, and we know it's had a negative impact on everything. But I think there are lots of positives out there, and I do think that the divers and the diving industry will bounce back from this purely because of the resilient factor. Or at least I hope so.
Fair enough. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, great. Dan, we've got a few questions coming in here now on the chat box. Lee Newman from Vancouver. Lee, do you want to go live, or do you want me or Dan to ask? Oh, you're here now. Just need your audio on, Lee. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, I just had a question for Lanny about the permanent line group. Sort of, if he could give a brief update on sort of what's happening with that, and also specifically updates on the line conditions in Car Wash and Maya Blue, two of the most common ones I would say down there, that had the thick white line last year, and lots of discussion after we left, and been trying to follow that. I just wondered if you had some updates for that.
Yeah, hi Lee, nice to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, Lenny.
Just for anyone else, really, as a background to that, we've had a sort of for years. It was all quite ad hoc with how cave line was done, and people would just sort of take it on themselves to have changes. And if you got a bit of time, which some of you might have at the moment, going back to some of the accounts of the line wars of the sort of 90s, early 2000s, where people were sort of ripping lines out and putting lines in, and we had there was a bit of a sort of argument about the cavern line in Car Wash, and I've been thinking about this for years. It was quite, it was a bit of frustration for me as a sort of local cave instructor, and had this proposal that we thought about maybe doing it in a virtual way so people can vote online. So on the back of the sort of arguments that happened with Car Wash, we sort of got together. It was voted on that we needed a committee. We've got a bunch of moderators and we get together every so often. Now, we haven't got together because of COVID. I've actually got the sort of final Car Wash vote. I'm in my sight line now, the little plastic box and all the voting forms. We were just about to get those out when all this sort of hit. We are going to have a meeting, I hope at the back end of this week, having a bit of a chat with the guys today. So hopefully we're going to get together and sort of go up on the balcony, up at my friend Natalie's Under the Jungle, and sort of keep socially distant, but have a chat about where we're going to go. So we've got the Car Wash cavern line stuff ready to go. We have got a bunch of line that Light Monkey very kindly donated. Someone gave us a good deal on. Maya Blue, that thick line has already been changed. And also with Maya Blue, that's the snow toe that we've decided is going to be the sort of trial run for a consistent sort of standard configuration for how we're going to put lines and how lines are going to be marked. So that's going to be coming up. But Maya Blue's shut at the moment, as is Car Wash. So there's not a lot of point doing anything until everything starts opening up again. There is some talk on the 1st of June that some of the tourist sort of facilities are going to open again, and that might include some of the cenotes. So if those places do open, that will give us the chance to get in and do some work there. But you know, the nice thing about the line committee is there is now a process. So rather, if you see a broken line, if there's something you disagree with, there is something to say. You know, you can go onto the website, Career Lineas. If you just Google sort of line committee Mexico, that will come up, and there's some information there, so people can actually say this is dangerous or wrong, and we can actually consider it and put it out to the community, and everyone has a stake. So it's kind of on hold at the moment, but hoping to get back in the next week or so.
Thanks, Lanny. Just one quick follow-up, if I may. The large or the long jump in Grand from the main line up to Paso, is that being considered, reconsidered? That will that get changed, do you think?
I mean, this is going quite sort of arcane, so I apologise for the people who are not sort of Mexican K drivers. That's one of the ones that I felt quite strongly about and have for years. That was put as a specific vote, and the decision from the community was not to change that long line, or that long jump. I know there's been several fatalities there. The only thing that makes them, and I wasn't, it was almost a good thing because it shows that we will basically comply with the wishes of the community. But it was one of the ones I was hoping was going to actually be changed. The only sort of thing that affects that is that Grand isn't actually open at the moment, so Grand is actually closed to all diving. Although Kalimba is open again, so you can get into that system from a different entrance. But no, I don't think that's going to happen for a while. If Grand continues to be shut, maybe we're basically talking to the owners at Cenote Hotel to try and get that open, and that may mean we just change the lines completely. But yeah, not for the moment, Lee, I don't think.
Okay, thanks, Lanny.
Thanks for that.
No worries, buddy. Nice to see you.
We just got a quick announcement now from Mark. Yeah, is that what you were after?
Yeah, go on. Fire away, Dan.
Mark, do you want to just talk about your webinar? And Mark's just got to shoot off, so thanks for coming and answering those questions, but go ahead and talk about your next thing.
Yeah, no worries, and I'll leave you guys to be getting on. I've put the details in the chat so people can find it there, but it's basically just say thanks for having me. We've got to shoot now to prepare for our show that's on in about 25-30 minutes, but it's on for an hour, so feel free to join us whenever you're done. Talking to Tim Clements and Marcus Rose tonight about citizen science, so should be quite an interesting talk. All the link and everything, like I said, is in the chat, so you can find us there on YouTube, and we'll be live. So thanks again, and see you soon.
Cheers, thanks for that, Mark. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
See you guys.
Everybody. Okay, we've got one from Mark. Mark Charnick.
Yeah, Mark Charnick. I think this one might be good for James Sanderson to answer. So, Mark, do you want to unmute and ask this one?
Yeah, cheers, guys. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all those that are doing webinars. If anything's come out of this, I think it's good that it's a level playing field for all organisations. So primarily we are just divers, all in the same boat, no matter what organisation, looking at how we're going to get through this. My question, though, really is following on from Anthony's question, really. With things moving slowly forward to getting out to diving, what would your recommendations be for those that are looking to get into diving or have sort of basically started? So, for example, a PADI open water diver looking to go on to do their advanced or that. Would you recommend that they do the theory and the book work so they're still keeping in the loop? Or would you say sort of really draw a line and just, if you're a newbie looking to get into diving, wait until we really know what's happening with the diving world, whether they're an enthusiastic diver or whether they're a progressional diver?
Yeah, do you know, I'm actually gonna backheel that question over to maybe Paul or Oli, because they've been much more engaged in this process in terms of bringing people through initially online training and then with a view to where they can get in the water. It's a brilliant question. I think they'll give a much more up-to-date answer than I can give, Mark.
Oli, you want to go or me?
Yeah, I'd like to take that actually. And I think there's two ways of looking at that. There's the angle of the student and there's the angle of the dive center, right? I feel if I give someone a course material, online material, and I don't do anything else, they're probably going to lose interest whilst they get through that course material or halfway through that course material. I think the key is that for anyone wanting to get into the next course, no matter how long it might take for us to get back in the water, I think the key is to have a real good engagement with the instructor and the center that you've chosen to use, right? So if that means that there is online course material available or that you order a book, whatever, that you get sent to your house, I think it's super important that there is maybe a webinar with your instructor your students on the course, or regular calls or something like that to coach you through the material so that you are understanding what fits in where and what is important, and that you're almost creating like a, you know, I don't want to say virtual dive environment, but an environment where you can almost imagine why you're doing skills and how they fit in. And if there are a center or an instructor that have video material available from previous courses, they might even be able to show you where those skills come in and where the practicality of what you're going to be learning will come in, so you get a little bit of an idea of what's coming. I think if you're sitting at home right now and you're an open water diver wanting to do an advanced, I think those are things that you need to be looking for rather than just doing some online material. I think you need to be looking for people that are willing to provide you with a bit more. You know, whether that's, like I said, a webinar or existing video material or anything along those lines. So you're really getting a bit of an idea of what it is that you're going to be doing, which will make you way more prepared for when you do get to the water stage.
Yeah, if I can jump in as well, because it's a brilliant question. So Italy were heavily hit by COVID-19, as we all know, and they were the first ones in our backyard to really get punished by it. And what actually happened was our friends and our distributors down in Italy, they contacted me and said that the Italian government had gone to all e-learning platforms, predominantly e-learning platforms. Actually, it was only e-learning platforms, whether that was a university or a school or engineering school or a scuba agency or kite surfing. And if the message was that during your downtime, why don't you amass more knowledge? Okay, so what we responded with that raid, much like many of the other training agencies responded with a lot of clever options to keep our divers engaged while we can no longer do the physical act of teaching. We launched free learning and we launched distance teaching. The idea behind free learning is we're, as an agency, and again, much like all the other agencies, we're dreadfully worried about the livelihoods of our instructors and our dive centers. The manufacturers, the whole industry are worried about our infrastructure. So what we did was with free learning was we gave our divers, our instructors and our trainers access to product that they could use to further their knowledge during their downtime. Now, used cleverly, this would mean if you were at Kevin's dive center, you would say, well, I'm going to do Explorer 30 or Advanced 35 or Master Rescue, or you're going to become a dive master or whatever. You will chat with Kevin and actually begin your learning process. Now, the idea was that we didn't want to put a massive financial obligation on the dive center, but we also didn't want this to just be some silly thing that everyone thought we were just throwing away for free and really rubbishing the dive industry, okay? Because that's not where we wanted to go. But for you, if you were interested in tech diving or interested in a Poseidon rebreather or whatever, you know, whatever that the agency has to offer, this is the time to actually go and participate and learn. And we all know that diving community is a very, very tight community. You know, the instructors and their students and the dive centers and their customers, we're all very, very intrinsically knit, you know, we knit together very, very well. And we actually really care about each other. So you're going to find that free learning platform works really, really well. Obviously, what we did and many others did was opened up some of our courses so that you could actually certify from home, so that when we do come out the end of COVID, you can walk out with your nitrox certification and you can have done your equipment certification, and in some agencies, your science of diving and all sorts of different things. Everybody's opened up different spectrums. But I think right now, and while we continue to suffer with COVID-19 and the limitations it places upon our industry, I think it would be very foolish for you not to grab with both hands and arms at as much knowledge as you possibly can, because your instructor is just going to embellish on that. Whether you grab hold of it now and we'll get unlocked next week and Kevin says, hey, Mark, come down and do a course with me next week, I think you'd be very foolish to not use this downtime to amass as much knowledge as possible. I mean, let's face it, you're sitting on a webinar now with some really, you know, very clever and forward-thinking scuba instructors and trainers. You've taken the time out of your day to do that. It'd be well worth you taking your time out of your day to have a look at a manual and have a go through that. But definitely, I agree with Oli. Try and interact with an instructor in the dive center so that the momentum stays there. You know, you don't just read 50 manuals and then can't work out actually where you want to go at the end of it. You don't want to get yourself all confused. But definitely grab it with both hands. That's my advice.
Cheers. Thank you. Yeah.
Anthony Searle's got a question.
I think come in here a second. Hang on. I'll just come in on that last one.
Yeah, go ahead, Lanny. Yeah, of course.
I think one of the things, I think the only real advantage of this situation is that the online content that's been put out there has been incredible. I think Paul's been quite modest. I think that what RAID have actually done is probably more generous than most of the other agencies by making all of their e-learning free. I know there's been some stuff being put out. You know, all the other agencies I teach for have put something out there, but none as sort of generous as RAID by making everything free. The other thing that most divers would really benefit from, particularly as they get to the higher levels, is the human factor stuff that Gareth Locke's been doing. He's doing a really good webinar series at the moment, and some of you might have seen the film that was released, I think, on Tuesday called If Only, which deals with quite a bit of a deep dive, if you excuse it, pardon the pun, into a rebreather fatality that happened a couple of years ago. It's only about half an hour, but it's an incredible story and a really, really nicely filmed piece. And going back to linking what Paul said, there is going to be released. I had a look at the drafts of it. There's a workbook to go with it, so we can actually look at the film and see what the lessons are from that. So there is so much out there, probably more than ever. A lot of it free, so it's almost the best time to be a diver sitting at home on your arse, because there is enormous stuff to keep yourself busy.
Yeah, that's a really good shout, Lanny. So that was Gareth Locke's If Only. So we'll pop a link to that in the chat in a minute as well. That's a really good shout, because I've watched that, and Gareth's a really good teacher. He's done his classes as well. Really appreciate that. Next question we've got, Anthony, do you want to ask yours? Because it was related to the last question about different agencies and picking and choosing the right training, that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So again, coming back to Anthony here in Shropshire, I'm a relatively new diver, and I suppose my relationship with an organisation is the relationship I have with my tutor, my instructor, which is Kev. Kev's brilliant. But where do you see RAID as an organisation going and being as a leading light in the diving world? Where do you see RAID succeeding where others don't? Because for me, my loyalty, if I'm really honest, to those of you involved with RAID at a high level, my loyalty is to Kevin, not necessarily loyalty to RAID. And I suppose I'm just trying to understand this organisation that I belong to, the greater thing that is RAID, and the direction that you're going in, and what that might mean if we compare it to others, and whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I don't know what the right words are, but is my question clear, or do you need more clarity?
I guess that's going to land on my doorstep. Okay, so a lot of the people sitting on this call are my really, really good friends. They understand the philosophy of why we decided to bite off RAID. I can tell you, trying to be a well-rounded training agency is a very, very difficult thing to do. I think our successes come from the fact that we are desperately trying to balance quality with quantity. Okay, so I've got Lanny and Ian on the call here, and they are cave instructors for us, and they've made comments about our cave program, for example. So at the moment, Steve Lewis, who's our training director, is working with them to make the changes. They're also making some regional changes. So we can add in regional stuff for Lanny in Mexico, for when Ian goes down to France, for perhaps when we're in Sardinia. So there's a lot of things there. I think I think you've nailed it on the head. The interaction between the diver and the instructor is the most important one. Any training agency, in my humble opinion, that says to you that their instructors are not their core is really being very, very silly about how they're moving forward. Because if you only have bad instructors at your training agency, it doesn't matter how good your product is. Your product will never get its full legs. What you try to do as a training agency is you're trying to make sure that your materials are as current as possible, so they back up your instructors and what they're saying as much as possible. So, for example, if you go on a tech course, for example, and it doesn't matter which one it is, rebreather, cave, or whatever, things are moving at an exponential rate of knots in that arena. Decompression theory, studies on CNS, all sorts of stuff. Do we use gradient factors, or is it RGBM, or should we be using VPM or VGM or whatever? These things are moving at an exponential rate of knots. And as an instructor, what is extremely frustrating is when they open a manual and it doesn't fit with what the mainstream industry is now grown to be. So one of the major advantages with RAID, and we live and learn much like any other agencies, we make as many mistakes as everyone. We're just a company, we're fallible. What we try and do is we try and listen, and we try and make those changes, so that when that instructor next opens that set of materials, those things are singing more along the lines of what that instructor is saying. We are still a dive center, instructor-centric industry, and we understand that your loyalty is going to lie with that instructor. I often make statements about how training agencies are very parasitic. So we have things like memberships, and we try and push you into doing continuing education left, right, and center, and get you, we say that continuing education is the way that the industry moves forward. At RAID, we don't believe that at all. First of all, we believe that your desire to go in a cave is what's going to make you phone up Lanny or Ian and say, I want to go in a cave or a mine. Doesn't matter how much I stand there and say you should do your cave course, you should do your cave course. Until your desire to go cave diving takes you there, the training agency really doesn't have much play. So what we want to do is we want to make every level that you as a diver choose to participate in as symbiotic with your instructor as possible to make you stay in the sport. Because at the end of the day, is there anything wrong with certifying as an open water 20 diver and staying as an open water 20 diver for the rest of your life? I'll give you a classic example. My dad learned to scuba dive with me when he was in his 60s, okay? And we went to Tenerife to certify into the whole, Con Ed is the way we move forward thing. And I said to my dad, you know what, Dad? You should do your advanced course and you should do this buoyancy specialty. And my dad looked at me like I'd lost my marbles. And he said to me, so at the end of this course, right, I'm not going to have good enough buoyancy. I'm going to have to stay for an extra 2 days to get my buoyancy to go and dive properly with you. And he said, as far as your advanced course is concerned, he said, I'm 60 odd years old. I just want to be able to swim around on fluffy reefs and maybe shallow wrecks, right? And ascend directly to the surface at a nice controlled rate, establish buoyancy on the surface and go home to your mum. I'm not interested in anything else. And that became a fundamental part of where I am. So if you go on a cave course with Lanny or Ian, or you go on a tech course with Oli, or you go on a recreational course, the whole point of the agency is to try and be as symbiotic with that instructor as humanly possible, so that you as they as the instructor and you as the diver have the most incredible experience. Because in actual fact, we don't know if you're going to come back for more training. So if you take any of us, what we all do is we all do guided dives, and we all do fun dives, and we all do these little expeditions, whether it's something like Cave Camp or going on a little rec trip with me to Malta. What we want is we want you to stay engaged in the sport. That's what we really, really want. And if that little backdrop that you've got behind you, that's how Con Ed gets sold. Because someone goes, oh, what's that wreck over there? Is that the GNSD? Oh, yeah, it is. Oh, man, I'd love to dive that. Well, you need to be this, this, and this before you can safely go and dive it. And that naturally sells the con ed, right? And that's what good instructors are chasing. So it's all about symbiosis for me. And that's what I think is going to lead RAID right to the forefront. We've not based ourselves on selling every single diver at RAID 400 courses. We are happy if you choose to be an open water diver and stay as an open water 20 diver. The same as Lanny is more than happy if you go there and do Cave 1 and you stay as a Cave 1 diver. He's not going to turn around to you and say you can't come and splosh around at my dive center because you're not a Cave 2 diver. You know, it's that symbiosis.
Can I just add something onto that, Paul? For a bit of colour for Anthony. Thing to remember as well, you know, your instructor in themselves as a diver is part of another broader community. So it may well be that your journey within that organization, instructors, and you say, look, I want to go and do this thing. Your instructor says, well, look, I can't take you there, but I've got just the guy for you. I've got just the girl for you, because they are part of a broader network, and they'll know who you know, who is going to fit your personality or your schedule or your diving objectives. So use them not only as a source of knowledge, but a gateway into a broader community of professionals as well.
Yeah, very good.
Cool. That's a great answer. I think to be honest, I picked up that, you know, I learned to dive with Paddy, and my I suppose one of the stark differences is exactly what you've just outlined in your answer in very good detail. Is it feels like a community of like-minded people who, if you, the diver, feel like you want to push yourself, if you want to stay as an open water 20, or if you want to go off and be a specialist in X, you have the ability to do so. You've only got to ask, but it needs to come from you, the individual. There's not someone there trying to sell you something particularly per se, just to get you, you know, on their gravy train, which I particularly like. So thank you. I don't want to be taking up the airwaves with just my questions. Thanks very much for the detail. Good questions.
Cheers, Anthony. Yeah, so we've got time for one last question, then we'll wrap up. This one's just come in on Facebook for Kev, because you mentioned earlier, I think, you learned to dive on holiday and then you really learned later on. So can you just expand on that? Where did you really learn to dive?
Okay, I suppose when I went through sort of my paddy career, and then I went out looking for, you know, individual instructors. I think it's quite important to pick the right person to do the course with, regardless of agency. But it just so happened that quite a few of the people I've trained with are in the room now, and we've all sort of migrated over to pre-raid. There's a guy here, Badger. That guy taught me to dive. I remember signing up for an intro to fundamentals day. I think we were either up at Kappa's or I can't remember where it was, because I ended up doing 2 or 3 of them with him because I loved it so much. And that's where I really did learn to dive, even though I was already an instructor at that time for another agency. I learned so much more with 4 hours in the water with James. So that's what kick-started me really into what we do now and what we see. You know, James tidied me up, and then I think we've done a bit of a twin set prime a day, and then went straight into a tech fundamental course, if you like, which, you know, I didn't pass. I didn't get a tech pass right away. And, you know, I wasn't bothered about that because that's not what it was all about. I think I jumped off side mount overnight and bought a twin set and turned up at one of James's classes and said, here I am. I've only had 2 dives. Let's go for it. So yeah, that's where I really sort of learned to dive. I'm sure you've got fond memories, James, of our time together.
It was a joyous couple of weekends, mate. I think you made me the man. You made me the man I am today, Kev.
I was the guy that broke you.
James, is he the reason you got the job at Aqualung, mate?
Yeah, I just had enough. I needed it out. I needed to get away from teaching. No, look, I mean that's a great point that Kevin raises. Is that, you know, classes should always be a two-way process, and even as an instructor, you know, you should be able and willing to learn. You know, a person smarter than me said, you know, you can't teach someone who already knows everything. I think it's just the ability to be able to go out and learn. It will benefit you as a diver, benefit you as an instructor, and you know, it's a good position to put yourself in. You know.
Yeah, that was an awesome story. Great end to this Q&A session. So cheers, everyone. Yeah, that's all we've got time for. So thanks, James, Kevin, Lanny, Paul, Ian, Ollie. Thanks everyone for coming as well. We've recorded this, so we'll put this up on YouTube as well. And if anyone's got any questions for any of the speakers, just pop them in the comments or send us a message, and I'm sure we can get those across and answered for you as well. So next week, we're doing our weekly webinar again. We've got Phil Metcalf from Alpha Marine Photography coming to talk about the Red Sea critters. So he's going to share a load of photos from his Red Sea adventures and talk about the kind of creatures you can expect there for when we're back on for these holidays. Little few tips on photography and things like that. So sign up on Facebook and join us there next week at 7 on a Tuesday. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.